On the 6th of December of 1185, the first king of Portugal, Afonso I, drew his last breath. The monarch was dead, and his son, Sancho, aged 31, became the second king of Portugal. For 15 years, the infant had been showing his valor on the battlefield since the moment his father made him a knight in 1170. During the 1170s, the then Prince Sancho participated in military campaigns against the Almohads, as well as the Leonese, and defended the kingdom against the great offensive launched by the Caliph Abu Yaqub Yusuf in 1184. Thus, it is natural that the first years of rule of the new European king would not be too different from his last as a prince. That is why, from 1185 to 1189, his role as a military ruler remained a crucial part of his policy. Sancho I launched campaigns against Leon, where he was defeated in Celurico, and defended Portugal successfully from a Leonese invasion in 1187 that attempted to conquer Trancoso and Linhares. After 1187, Sancho would no longer fight his Christian brother-in-law, who died in 1188. The next campaigns the king would participate in would be a part of the Reconquest and even of the Third Crusade. On the month of October of the year 1187, the Ayyubid Sultanate, led by Saladin, besieged and conquered Jerusalem. Later in that month, Pope Gregory VIII called for a crusade to reconquer the holiest city in Christendom. The Christian quest surpassed the First Crusade in numbers, and it was led by the King of England, Richard I, Philip II of France, and by the Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick Barbarossa. Several routes were taken by the Christians. Some armies chose to go on foot, departing from Ratisbon and reaching the Middle East by entering through Anatolia. Others opted for a dual path, which was the case of those who departed from Paris, reached Genoa on foot, and then left the Italian Republic by ship. But a third group of crusaders chose to make their way to the Holy Land solely by sailing. They departed from Brittany in the Angevine Empire, and their army was made up of Frisians, Flemish and Danes. Most of them ended up having to dock in Algarve in the summer of 1189. When King Sancho heard of the news, he asked them for their assistance in taking the castle of Alvor, which the Crusader army was able to do. Not too long after, a new Crusader armada, this time made up of 37 ships, docked in Lisbon. The king immediately saw an opportunity to launch an offensive to the southwest of the Iberian Peninsula, given the dispute in claims to conquer that area between the Christian monarchs, and the fact two of those, the Castilians and the Leonese, were at war with one another. Furthermore, Al-Mansur, the Almohad Caliph, was also far from Portugal, because of a rebellion he was fighting in the Balear Islands. In addition, the monarch had a desire of stopping Muslim Corsair attacks that departed from Algarve to enslave as many Portuguese people as possible. For this goal to be achieved, he chose to conquer the city of Silves, which was at that time one of the richest in the peninsula and a hub for piracy. Sancho I thus asked for the Crusaders' help, who accepted to give assistance to the monarch. After terms were agreed, a 3,500 military force travelled by sea to Silves, which it reached on the 18th of July. Meanwhile, the Portuguese army, commanded by nobleman Dom Mendo, made its march on land. As for the city of Silves, it was better protected than Lisbon, being full of walls as well as moats, some of them filled with water. On the 20th of July, the Crusaders brought their ships close to the city, and on the same day made camp close to the walls. On the 21st of July, the Crusaders advanced with their ladders and passed the moats. From inside the walls, the Muslims watched in panic and fled from the Medina quarter, taking refuge in the citadel. On the 25th of July, the full habitational area had already been conquered. 4 days later, King Sancho I arrived with a large army composed of infantrymen, cavalrymen, as well as knights of the Order of the Temple, knights of Aviz, and Hospitallers. Furthermore, the monarch brought siege weapons and ordered 40 galleys to block the city by sea. Not too long after, the machines started raining rocks on the walls, but from inside, the Muslim trebuchets made their damage on the Allied force. In early August, the Christians focused on attacking the cuirass and brought their ladders under a mantle, but from inside the walls the Muslims burnt it, but not too long after that the fire stuck to the walls. The monarch immediately realized that the walls were close to falling down, so he ordered for his siege weapons to fire on them. Furthermore, the crusaders stuck hooks to different rocks that were on the loose, and started removing several of them at a time. At the same time, other Portuguese and crusaders started digging mines. On the 9th of August, they set fire to them and were able to make a wall of the castle fall. Not too long after, the Christians were able to tear down the keep. The king then called for the ladders to be put on the walls and for his men to climb them. The Muslims and Christians then fought, but the latter prevailed and the former fled to the Medina quarter. Finally, on the 12th of August, the cuirass that constituted the water supply to the city was fully occupied by the crusaders, who filled the well with rocks and dirt. Meanwhile, the Flemish were doing their best to mine the citadel. On the Muslim side, the resistance pursued, with the Almohads digging successful countermines, as well as launching night raids. Then, the Christians and Muslims used their trebuchets against one another. As for the situation among the Christian leadership, some of the morale was decaying because of the lack of food on the Crusader side. Thus, on the 18th of August, the main Portuguese knights who accompanied Sancho I started suggesting to the king to give up on the enterprise, but such measure was not taken, for the Crusaders insisted on finishing the conquest. On the Muslim side, hunger was not the biggest problem, but thirst. Many were dying, and eventually a Muslim man reached the Crusader camp and informed the Crusaders of the situation inside the walls. Others followed him. As late August was approaching, the Christians kept digging their mines in the hope of making the walls of the citadel fall. The Muslims would intercept the Christians several times, and both would even fight under the ground. But finally, on the 1st of September 1189, full of thirst and terrified of the mines, the governor negotiated with Sancho the delivery of the city to the Portuguese, and bargained for the lives of the besieged. After the conditions were agreed, the monarch let the Muslims leave the city. 2 days later, the besieged started leaving the walls. They would later find their refuge in Cadiz. Once the Christians occupied the castle, they saw that of their original 450 brethren who had been taken hostage, only 200 were alive, and all of them were malnourished, having survived with the juice of figs and even humid soil. The king then ordered the construction of a cathedral and left men of his garrison there to protect it. As for the Crusaders, on the 7th of September they shared the loot between them, and on the first day of autumn left on their ships from the bar of Silves. When it comes to the king, he started calling himself, in the documents he signed, King Sancho of Portugal, Silves and Algarve. Also, due to the help he received by the military monastic orders, he donated different castles and lands to them from 1189 to 1191.